In this video, I'm going to set up a really basic example where you use MVVM or MVI repository pattern and use dependency injection with Hilt. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be setting up some really basic architecture. Like I said, we'll have a single activity. We're going to have a view model. I'm going to show you how Hilt makes dependency injection easier with view models. It's way simpler than it was before. We're going to have a repository and we're going to have two data sources. One will be the cache and one will be retrofit, so making a network request. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to pull some network data from one of my websites. It's a public website. I got some like fake data up there and we're just going to pull that data. We're going to cache it into the SQLite database using the room persistence library, and then we're going to display that data on the UI. Before we start, let's go take a look at a demo. All right, so here I have the emulator on the screen. I'm going to launch the application, and what you're going to see here is you're going to see a progress bar getting that network data, and once it gets that network data, it caches it and then displays it on the screen. So it's a very simple application. Just gets some data from the network, caches it, and displays it. The data is coming from one of my websites, openapi.xyz. You can go to /placeholder/blogs, and here's just some JSON data, and this is the data that we're actually pulling to display in the application. It's just static data, nothing special, just something that I like to have up here just in case I have to, get some data and try and see if something works in an application. Just for clarification, if you want to know where to get the source code for this project, the starting point that I'm going to be starting at is this basic MVI repository pattern start branch right here. So if you go to the repository Dagger Hilt Playground, I actually named it Player Ground. That was by accident. It should be Playground. This is the starting point code, and this is the code that you'll end up with. So basic MVI repository pattern. Just in case you are not familiar with Git, most of you probably are. If you want to find the branch, just click on branch here, and you'll find the starting branch and then the finishing branch here. So if you want to take a look at the code ahead of time, go ahead. But I'm going to be writing everything out on video. So if you want to clone the repository, just go to code, and you can copy this link and just open Android Studio, which I will do right now. And you can go to new, imports, project and version control, click Git, and just paste the link right there and click clone. If you just want to start your own code, which is totally fine because I'm starting with pretty much absolutely a blank project, you can just go to file, new project, and create a blank project, and you'll be looking at pretty much what I'm looking at here right now. I just have a single activity. I have some stuff in the layout here. If I go to activity main, I just got a progress bar with a text view. Nothing special here. You could easily copy this in. And I have some stuff in the build.gradle file, which we're going to go over right now. Let's close these, and we'll go to the build.gradle project file first. So that's going to be this file right here. And again, I've gone over kind of all of this Hilt setup stuff in previous videos. I'll put a link up in the corner here to where you need to go if you need to know how to get started with Hilt, which is the dependency injection framework that we're using. But I go over everything here, like getting the class path for Hilt in the build.gradle project file. And then if you go to the build.gradle app file, we have some more dependencies here, all for Hilt also. So these dependencies right here, again, there's a link up above. There should be a card showing on the video. You can click that and figure out how to get started with Hilt. So got the dependencies, got to set the Java version right here, and make sure to get Kotlin capped, get the Hilt Android plugin, which is this one right here. And these plugins should come with a new project when you open one with Android Studio. So that's going to be it. That's the setup. And again, you can go watch videos on how to get started with that setup. But let's get started with this project. So first things first is we need a way to model the data. So I'm actually going to go to openapi.xyz placeholder blogs. So this is the data that we're modeling. And if you want to get a more clean kind of look at what this data looks like, we can go to like a JSON beautifier, and just do any of these. These are all fine. And just paste the JSON data into here and go process. So it's going to give you a cleaner look at what that data looks like. So you can see there's a primary key, a title, a body, an image, and a category. These are all strings except for the primary key, which is an integer. So that's what this data structure looks like when it's kind of cleaned up a little bit. So essentially here, the first thing we need to do is build a model for this data. So like this is a blog object, this is a blog object, and we need to model that in Android Studio. Now keep in mind, in the actual application, all I'm displaying is the title of these blog posts. So if you look here, here's ready for a walk, there's ready for a walk. This one says Maisie sleeping, there's Maisie sleeping. So I'm actually just using the titles, but we're gonna get all of the data using Retrofit. We're not just gonna get the title. So I wanna accurately model this data. So let's go to Android Studio and let's build that model. So coming on over here to the main package directory, I'm gonna click on a new package and call it model. Now inside of model, I'm going to build a new model. This is going to be the blog class. So writing in blog and then selecting class. And I can add this to get, it doesn't really matter. So this is going to be a data class because it's going to structure some data. So I want to get 5 fields in here, variable ID, which is going to be an integer. We have a variable title, which is going to be a string. And I'm going to copy that 3 more times because these are all also going to be strings. We're going to have the body, we're going to have the image, and we are going to have the category. So those are all the fields for our data structure. I can get rid of these brackets. So again, just to kind of remind you, let me go to the beautifier again. Remember, we have primary key, title, body, image, and category, and those are the fields that you see here. One question you might have here is why I'm calling this ID, but in the data structure here, this is PK, so it's primary key. Why am I naming this different? So just kind of know that this is not a mistake, and we're going to be addressing this later using a mapper class. So just kind of know that, yes, I know this is not primary key, but we're going to be handling that later. Now we're going to be working on the network request code, everything needed to make those network requests using the third-party library Retrofit. So we need to get the dependencies for Retrofit before we can actually use it. So I'm going to open up a new browser here, go to Retrofit, go Retrofit 2. There's the link to the open source library. And if you go down to the download section, it shows you how to get started using Retrofit. So here is the dependency. I'm just going to copy that, go back to Android Studio, go into the build.gradle project file, and I'm going to paste this down below. And I'm going to clean this up a little bit. So I'm going to define a Retrofit version, which is, so I can just say, Retrofit equals 2.2.0, I believe is the newest version. If you're wondering where I got that version from, you can go to the documentation and it will tell you where to get it. So if you click this available on GitHub link, that will take you to like the source code and you can see what the newest version is. So that's where I'm getting that from. I actually think it's not 2.2.0, I think it's 2.6.0. So there's the version. Now let's pass this as a variable. So I'm going to delete these single quotes and put in double quotes, and that's going to allow me to pass a variable here. So there's that Retrofit version. We also need one more Retrofit dependency, and that's going to be for the JSON converter. So if you go to the Retrofit documentation and you scroll around here, I can't remember exactly where it is. Here it is. There's all these different converters for getting different types of data. We're going to be working with JSON data, so the network data is JSON data, so we need to use this JSON converter right here. So I'm just going to copy this, com square up Retrofit 2 converter JSON. Now go back to Android Studio, paste that in, and then pass the version, the Retrofit version here again. So Retrofit. So once we got those, we can sync it, and Android Studio will hopefully not give us any errors. Now we can start working on the Retrofit code for the project. So I'm going to right click on the main package directory, go to create a new package, and just call this Retrofit. Typically, you probably don't want to name this Retrofit, but I'm trying to simplify this architecture just so you can kind of see the big picture here. Usually you'd put it into like if you were using clean architecture, you would do different data sources, like a cache data source, a network data source. But we're just like keeping this really simple here, so I'm just going to call it Retrofit. So it's really clear that all the Retrofit stuff is going to be inside of this package. Okay, so let's close these up, and I'll leave this open because we're going to reference this. So the first class that I want to build inside of our new Retrofit package is going to be a blog network entity. And this is going to be the class that models what the data is going to look like coming from the network. So I could call this a data class actually. And let's open this up and add some fields. So I'm going to use the serialized name annotation and get that import. This is now the name that I'm looking for in the data. So I'm passing PK here. And if we go to the, whoops, I opened the wrong window, to our data structure, that's what this needs to match. It needs to match the name of the key of the data that you're retrieving. So we're going to have primary key, title, body, image, and category, all of those fields. Then at expose, so getting that import, and then var ID is integer. So that's going to be our very first field. This is the primary key field. So I'm going to copy this a bunch more times, should be 4 more times. We have the title is the next one, and this is going to be a string. And this, of course, needs to match that because you need to tell Retrofit what to look for when it's retrieving that data. The next one is going to be, the body, and that's also going to be a string. This will be body. The next one will be the category. and then just change that to category, change this to string, and the last one will be the image. I think the image was actually before the category, but the order does not matter here. You can do these in any order. So just once again, these are now matching the keys for the data that we're retrieving. So primary key, that's an integer, title, that's a string, body, that's a string, image is string, and category is string. So now that we have our data modeled, we can build the retrofit interface that's going to be responsible for constructing our retrofit object that gets the network data. So if you're familiar with retrofit, this is going to look, very familiar to you. You've done this probably 100 times. This is going to be an interface, and I'm just going to call it blog retrofit. Again, the naming here is not the best, but I want to be really clear, like, this is all the retrofit stuff, because later when we go to use Hilt, I'm going to have like a retrofit module, a caching module. I just think that for learning purposes, this naming convention is fine. So now I'm going to use @get. And if you're familiar with retrofit, you know what this is all about. I'm doing a get request. This is going to be a suspend function. I'm just going to call it get. You can call this anything. You can call it like get stuff, get whatever you want. I'm just calling it get just for simplicity. And this is going to return a blog network entity. So that's the data model that we just built. And inside of the get annotation, I need to also write blogs. So if you're familiar with retrofit, you know that there's this base URL that we're going to need to pass. So what I'm trying to do here is I'm going to be mimicking or mocking out exactly what this URL is going to look like. So it's going to be openapi.xyz, placeholder, and then blogs. So this is the last kind of section of that URL, that blog section. Okay, so now we need a way to map these blog network entity objects to the blog objects, because remember, this is like our project level model. This model is like a model exclusive to only retrofit. So once we get that data from retrofit, we need to convert it over to like our project model, which is this model right here. If you're using clean architecture, or if you use clean architecture, this would be considered the domain model. This is the model that never changes. It's sort of central to the whole project. And then you have other models that are built for different purposes inside of the project. So we need a way to map this to this and also map this to this. So back and forth between the two. So I'm going to create a new package inside the main package directory, call this util. And then inside of util, I'm going to create a class named entity mapper. So entity mapper, and this is actually going to be an interface. So the first kind of generic parameter that we're going to pass up here is the entity, and the second is going to be the domain model. So remember, like I said, the blog model is basically the domain model. This is what you would consider the domain model. And then the other models are the entity models. So that would be like this class right here. This is an entity model. It has a specific purpose for a piece of the application. So we need functions to map one type to the other. So function map from entity can be the first one. So from entity, this will take an entity as input, just take that generic type of entity, and it's going to return a domain model. And then we need the opposite. So we need to do map to entity, so map to entity. This will of course take then a domain model, and it's going to output an entity. Entity. So one function to map to a domain model, one function to map away from a domain model. Now I'm going to go back into our retrofit package here and build one more class. So new Kotlin file, and this is going to be called network mapper, because that's what it is. It's going to be the class responsible for mapping the network objects to the domain objects. So here we have network mapper, and I'm going to use @inject on the constructor because I'm going to be providing this with Hilt later on. So just making sure to @inject here. Add a constructor because that's required to use Hilt, and this is going to extend that entity mapper that I just created. So entity mapper, and then I want to pass the two types. So the entity in this case is the blog network entity, and then the domain model, the domain object, is that blog model class that I created. Now it's giving me a warning here telling me that I need to implement the members of that interface, which are these two functions right here, map to entity and map from entity and map to entity. So if I just hold a Control or Alt Enter on here, go implement members, get both of those functions. Now I can write out those use cases. So both are pretty simple. This one could just be like returning a new blog object in where the ID is the entity.id, the title is the entity.title, the body is the entity.body, the image is, guess what, the entity.image, and the last one is category, so entity.category. So these kind of conversions are actually really simple. Sometimes they're more complex, but in this example, they're very straightforward. There's not really much difference at all between the entity and the actual model itself. So we're going to do the same thing down here. I'm actually just going to copy this because it's going to be almost the same. This will just be the network network or blog network entity, so blog network entity, and then just change all of these entities to say domain model, and we are good to go. Now, as a last function down here, this isn't part of the interface implementation, but I'm gonna add one more function for converting maps of objects, and we're gonna be using this later. So function map from entity list, and this will take a list of entities, and so list of blog network entity, and it's going to output a list of blog objects. So taking in a list of entities and outputting a list of blogs. So I'm just going to say return entities.map. This is a Kotlin function. I'll say map from entity and then just pass it. So I'm just calling that function that I built up here, map from entity, and I'm calling it on every entry within that list. So just converting all of those objects into blog objects and then outputting that list. Okay, so that's pretty much all the retrofit setup we need, other than, of course, we do need the base URL, but we're going to get to that later. But that's kind of generally all the retrofit stuff that we need. So I'm going to close all of this, and we're going to work on now the room stuff, so the database caching stuff. And to get started, we, of course, need a dependency. So let's get that dependency. I'm going to just copy this actually from the source code for the project. So if you just go to GitHub, there's going to be a link down below, by the way, for you to easily grab this. Go to my Dagger Hilt playground or player ground, and let's grab these room dependencies. So you can go to any branch, they all have this dependency. Click on build.gradle, scroll down and grab the room dependency. So this right here. This is to use the room persistence library so that we can cache some data. So pasting that in, we have the room runtime, the KTX extension, and we have the compiler, so the annotation processing. Now we're going to do kind of the same thing that we just did with retrofit, but with room. So I'm going to right click on the main package directory. I'm going to name this package room just to make it really clear what we're putting in here. Now I'm going to create a new class. This is going to be the blog cache entity. So blog cache entity. Again, very similar to what we just did before. This will be a data class. And I want to add all of the kind of room setup to this. So you got to annotate it with @entity. We got to give it a table name. This is the database table name that it's going to have. I'll just call it blogs because, yes, there's going to be blogs stored in here. I can open this up, and I want to do primary key for the first annotation. So primary key, I can get that import, say auto generate equal to false because we are going to be inserting the primary keys. Remember, if you look at the network data, let me just pull up a window here. If you look at the network data, remember we have primary keys. So we don't want room to generate primary keys automatically. We're already going to have those. We don't want to generate those. So grabbing that primary key annotation, now we need the column info annotation, getting that. This is to name what the column is going to look like in the database. This is going to be the ID column. And then we just need the fields. So the first one is the ID. And now I'm going to copy this a couple more times. Actually, I'll copy it one more time because this is going to be a string. And then I'll copy all of those ones together. So this is going to be the title, getting that. So the title, now this is a string. Oh, get rid of the primary key. We don't need that. So copying this, pasting it 3 more times when we need the body, so getting that one. We need the category, getting that one. And then we need the image and getting that one. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, Mitch, why did you even bother making these cache entities and network entities when they look so similar to the data model? And the answer is it's just good practice. Generally speaking, the entities from the network or the cache or wherever you're getting your data aren't necessarily going to look like your data model. It's kind of just pure luck, or, well, I mean, I built this, so of course it's like convenient because it was supposed to be simple, but usually they don't look exactly the same. The data structures can be different. So it's good practice just to make these entities, go through the process, make the mappers, all that kind of stuff, because typically you're going to have to do that. So now we have our model. Let's build a mapper. So let's go into room, right click on the room package, new Kotlin file, and this will be called cache mapper. So again, this is kind of the same process we did with the retrofit package here. We built the blog network entity, then we built the network mapper, and then we built the class that is going to be able to do the actual network request. We're going to do the same thing here. So we're building this caching mapper. I'm going to annotate this with @inject because we're going to be providing this with Hilt later on. It doesn't take any constructor arguments, but I do need to extend the entity mapper. And in this case, we have the blog cache entity and the blog for our 2 models. So now I need to implement those members. So Alt-Enter on here, implement members, get both of those. I'm going to give myself some more room here. And this is pretty simple, just like the other one, because our models are very similar. Just going to do return a new blog model where the ID equals the entity.id. The title equals the entity.title. We have the body equals entity.body. Category equals entity.category. And the last one is image equals entity.image. So those are all the fields, pretty simple. Going to copy that, paste it down below, change this to blog cache entity, and then change all of these to domain model. Pretty straightforward, very simple stuff. And then again, to finish this up, we're going to build a function for mapping a list. So map from entity list. This will take entities as input, so a list of blog cache entities. This is going to output a list of blogs. So then return entities.map, and then we want to do map from entity, and then just pass it. Okay, so we have our entity model. We have our mapper to map it to our domain model. Now we need to set up the stuff for actually building the database and interacting with it. So right click on Room, go to New Column File. This is going to be called Blog Database. And if you're wondering about all this stuff, like how do I know how to do this stuff, this is all available in the documentation. So if you just Google, I'll just bring up a window here. So if you were just to literally Google like Room Database Android and look for the link that takes you to the Android developer documentation, this one right here, this would show you everything that I'm doing right now. This is pretty known stuff. It's not a secret. There's great articles about it. There's code labs, easy stuff to follow. Also, I have courses on my website. So if you wanted some extra help, like the documentation was just not doing it for you, you could go to codingwithmitch.com, and I have a room persistence library course right here for beginners. So SQLite for beginners, room persistence library. It's completely free. You just got to register and you can watch it. I show you everything from, installing Android Studio all the way down to, interacting, all of the different interactions with the database. You have inserts, updates, deletes, queries, all that kind of stuff. All right, back to the project. All right, so building the database. We need to annotate this with @database and reference the, you get that import first, then do entities equals the list of wherever those entities are. So these are like the database tables. So just do blog cache entity because that's this right here. It knows that it's going to be a table because I've annotated it with @entity. So just telling it that, yes, here's my database table, and we need to tell it what version this is for the database. If you ever make updates to your entities or your database, you just need to remember to increment this number. But this is the first time we're building it, so version 1 is fine. Now this is going to be an abstract class because there's going to be some code generation that goes on behind the scenes that Room is going to do for us. So this is going to extend Room database. You want to initialize that, open it up, and now we want to do another abstract function to get a reference to the DAO. Again, in the background, there's some code generation that goes on, so it's not really going to be clear to you like what is happening here. Also, we haven't built the DAO yet. We're going to do that next. And the last thing in here is going to be the companion object, and this is going to hold a reference to the database name. So it's just going to be a constant value, a constant string value named blog_db. So what is this DAO thing? Well, we're going to build that right now. So if we right click on Room, go to New Kotlin file, I'm going to call this blog DAO, and this is going to be an interface. This is sort of analogous to what we just did with Retrofit. So if you look here, we have this kind of interface that defines what functions Retrofit is going to have available to it to get data. It's kind of the same thing with the DAO. We have an interface here, and this is going to be the functions that kind of tell the database what it can do, or the functions, that it's capable of using, I guess. So we can do an insert operation so that we can actually insert data, and we want to pass a conflict strategy. So what happens if there is a database entry that is the same as another database entry? In that case, what do you want to do? So we say on conflict strategy, and I can get that import.replace. So if there's a conflict, we just want to replace the data. I want to do suspend function, insert, I'll call it. We want to insert a blog entity. So blog cache entity, and this is going to return a long. The long value denotes what row inside of the database that was inserted. So if it got inserted into row 3, it would return a 3. If it got inserted into row 10, it would return a 10. If it was not inserted and there was an error, it would return -1. Now the next function, which is going to be the last one, is going to be a query for getting data from the database. So I'm going to say select all from blogs. So this is the blogs table. Also notice that it was smart enough to do an autocomplete there. So right there, it's telling me that, hey, it looks like there's going to be this table named blogs. It knows that because inside of the blog DAO class, we have a reference to the entity, and that entity has a table name of blogs. So it's smart enough to know, hey, okay, there is a database table here, and I'm going to be querying some data from that table. Now this will be a suspend function, get, and it's going to return a blog cache entity. By the way, if you guys don't know what suspend functions are, you probably saw that I added them to the DAO, and I also added them to the Retrofit class. Suspend functions are a Kotlin Coroutines thing. So it's basically saying that this is going to be, or I have the option to execute this asynchronously. I can do it on a background thread. And you know, if you've been around Android development for any amount of time, if you're getting data from the network or from the cache, you need to do it asynchronously. So that's why I'm marking these as suspend functions. Okay, so now that we have our kind of room stuff set up, we have our retrofit stuff set up. Now it's going to be time to build the Hilt part of this. So we want to provide these things so they can be injected into our repository. We want to build everything required for that. So I'm going to create a new package inside the main package directory. It's going to call this DI. And inside DI, I'm going to create a couple classes. And these are going to be Dagger modules. So the first one is going to be a retrofit module. And as you probably guessed, yes, we're going to be putting all of our retrofit dependencies inside of here. So it's going to be an object because I want this to be a singleton. I want the dependencies in here to be static, more or less. There's only going to be one instance of them. So for a module, I need to annotate this with @module. And then for Hilt, it's very easy. We don't need to like add these modules to our components or anything like that anymore. We just want to write install in and then tell it where we're going to be installing it. This one is going to be an application-wide dependency, so I'm going to install it into the application component. And keep in mind, we haven't done any of the Hilt setup stuff yet. Again, I'll put a video up here linking to where you can see, how to get started with Hilt, but I'm going to be doing it later on. There's not really that much involved. We just need to add some annotations to some classes, but this is kind of just like the starting point where we need to define our dependencies. So what's the first one? The first one is going to be a singleton because it's going to be installed in the application component. If you don't know anything about scoping, by the way, like you don't understand what this singleton thing is, I encourage you to watch my Hilt video on scoping where I explain all that. I'll put a link up here and you can go check that out, but I'm not going to be explaining it in this video. So add provides, and then just do provide the network mapper. That's going to be our first dependency. It's going to be of type entity mapper. It'll be the two types that it's using are the blog network entity and then the blog object class. I'm going to return a network mapper. So that's the network mapper class that I showed you. Oh, you know what? I actually just realized that I made a mistake because I think, let's go into network mapper. I actually have an inject on this constructor, so I don't even need to provide this. I can actually get rid of that dependency. So just ignore that last thing that I did there, and we will move on. The next dependency will be also a singleton. They're all going to be singleton. I'm going to use @provides and do provide JSON builder. This is going to return a JSON object and get that import. So I want to do return JSON builder. Initialize that, get the import, to exclude fields without expose annotation. Actually, you can add this or not add this. It's just kind of the way I built this is I added the expose annotation. So if there happened to be a field in here that was not annotated with @expose, it would ignore it. But we don't. All of our fields are annotated with @expose, so it really doesn't matter. So you could, if you wanted to, technically, you could delete all of this expose if you wanted to, and then you could just delete this also. It wouldn't really matter. I'm going to leave it, and I'm going to leave these in here because that's just kind of what I do. It's just the general pattern that I always follow. So I'm going to leave it, but just know that you don't have to. And then call .create, and that's going to build that JSON object. So the JSON object is responsible for parsing that JSON data and converting it into Java objects, which is what we want. These are Java objects, so that's what we want to do. We want to convert this to, or we want to convert the JSON data into these objects. That's what this builder's for. Now I'm going to copy the singleton and the provides, paste that down below. I'll do provide retrofit. And I'm going to take the JSON object as input. So Hilt is smart enough that it can find that dependency and accept it as input here. And I'm going to return a retrofit builder object. So getting that import, now I want to do retrofit.builder and do .base URL. So here's that base URL that I was talking about earlier. It's going to be https openapi.xyz/placeholder, and make sure to do a trailing slash. So this is that URL up here that I was talking about. Openapi.xyz placeholder, and then the last part here is blogs, which we can find inside of the retrofit here. So that's this part right here. The last part is blogs. So coming back to here, now we need to add a converter factory. So we need to tell it how to convert this data, how to convert that JSON data into those Java objects. So I can do JSON converter factory.create make sure to get that import .create, and then pass that JSON object that I built up here. So it's passing this JSON object that's being returned into the builder so that it knows how to convert those objects. Now, the last dependency here is going to be the actual retrofit, the blog retrofit interface right here. So we're going to build this with retrofit. So singleton provides, do fun provide blog service, I'll call it. And it's going to take the retrofit builder as input because it's being returned up here. So we're going to take that as input. I'm going to return blog retrofit. So return retrofit dot build, and then do .create and then reference that interface. So blog retrofit class.java, and that'll build our retrofit instance. So now that we have this, we can inject this into things. So like just as an example, let's just create a new package here. I'll call it, repository. Inside of repository, I'll create a new class called main repository. It'll be a class. So if I wanted to, I could annotate this with @inject, add a constructor, and do private value retrofit and pass that blog retrofit object. It would be smart enough, Hilt would be smart enough to inject this where it's required. So this is kind of just a sneak peek into how we're going to be using this. I'm going to delete this for now because I don't want to confuse you. We're going to come back and work on the main repository later. So let's just delete that. So that is going to be the retrofit module. Now, since we built a module and we haven't really finished setting up Hilt and setting up Dagger yet, I'm going to do that right now before we continue with the other modules. Again, I have a video on how you can do this. I'll put a link up here, just how to get started with Hilt, but now I'm going to show you everything that you need to know. So the first thing that you actually want to do is build an application class. So I'm just going to call it my application, and it's going to be a new class. So my application, it's going to extend application, and we need to add a special annotation up here, Hilt Android app. And it's giving me a warning saying I need to add this to the manifest. So that's what I'm going to do. Go into the Android manifest, add the name parameter, and just reference my application. So I can close that. I'm done in there, and that should be good to go. So that's going to kick off kind of all the Dagger, the Hilt code generation stuff. It's going to generate all of the components that we need so that we can start using Hilt. Much, much easier than what you would have to do with Dagger before. Now I'm going to go into main activity and annotate this with Android entry point. Therefore, I can inject things into this. So like, for example, if I wanted to inject my retrofit, my blog retrofit instance, I could inject this. I could inject the JSON object, JSON, it would know how to build that too. I'm not going to inject those, but just kind of giving you an idea of what I could do if I wanted to now that we've kind of set up Dagger, or set up Hilt, sorry. So we've got our retrofit module. I'm actually going to close all these just to kind of clean things up a little bit. Now I want to do the same thing with the room dependency. So we have like our blog cache entity. We have to build our DAO. We have to build a database. We have to build our cache mapper. Actually, we don't have to build the cache mapper because it's got the inject on the constructor, so that's fine. But what I'm trying to say here is we need to build another module for all of the room stuff. So let's do that. Let's right click here, and I'm going to call this room module, just so it's really clear what this is going to be doing. And it's going to be an object just like the other module. Annotate this with that module. And I want to install this into the application component. So install into the application component.class. So I'm installing it into the app-wide dependency component, the one that will exist as long as the application is alive. There are different components. There's an activity component. There is an activity retained, what is it called? Activity retained component. There's a fragment component. Those components I explain in my video on scoping, so I encourage you to go check that out. But we're going to be just using or installing into the application component for all of the dependencies in this video. So at singleton, at provides, do function provide. Oh, I almost did it again. I was going to provide the cache mapper, but we don't actually need that because it's got the cache mapper already has inject on the constructor, so I don't need to do that. Just trying to break a habit. So we're going to provide the database first. So I'll do fun provide blog DB, and this will take the application context as input. It's going to need that to build itself. So it's going to be a context object, and I want to output a blog database. So getting all of those imports, now I want to return, whoops, not sure why the tabs got messed up there, return room.database, get that import, database builder. I want to pass the context. I want to pass the blog database class, so just referencing what we are building. Now I want to pass the database name, so that's a constant inside of our blog database. So blog database.database name. Now I want to call fallback to destructive migration and then .build. And that's going to build that blog database object. So that's just like essentially just building the database inside of the project. So now we can use this database and get access to the DAO. So I'll copy singleton and provides one more time, paste it down below, and I'll do fun provide blog DAO. This will take the blog database as input, and it's gonna spit out a blog DAO. And I just want to do return blog database.dao, and that's how we get a reference to the DAO. That's what we're really after here. We're after the DAO. That's going to give us access to all the functions that we can use to interact with the database. So with that, we have our room module and we have our retrofit module. So we have our two modules for providing the dependencies for the caching kind of dependencies and then the network operation dependencies. Now we're almost ready to start working on the repository. Before we do that, we need to build a couple like utility classes, actually one utility class more specifically. So I'm going to go into the util package, go to new class, and this is going to be called data state. Now, if you're familiar with my courses, you watch a lot of my courses, you know how I typically build a data state class. And this is not going to be typically how I build the data state class. I greatly sort of simplified this so that, because this is just it's a simple video, it's a simple example. Usually I have a much more complicated data state class that handles all kinds of different stuff, different state messages, state errors, data coming in, all kinds of different stuff. This is just going to be a very simplified version. So if you want more information on kind of like a more complex example, I definitely encourage you to go to codingwithmitch.com and maybe checking out my clean architecture course. So if you go to courses, you go down to clean architecture, that's a really good course. It shows you a much more advanced look at kind of all of the things that I'm talking about in this video. So check that out. If you're wondering about it and you don't want to pay for it, you can click it and watch the course demo and see kind of what it's all about. Now let's get back to the project. So this is going to be a sealed class. And if you don't know what a sealed class is, just go to my YouTube channel and search sealed class and I'll explain what that is. Pretty sure I have videos on sealed classes. It's going to take a generic type of R, we'll say. It's going to have 2 or 3 classes inside here. The data class for a success case. So what happens if a network operation is successful, or what if some kind of operation is successful? In that case, I want to return some data. So we'll just call it data and it'll be of type T, and it will return data state and type T, and we'll just initialize that. So that's the first one. Next will be an error case. So data class error value, it'll take an exception, and we just want to return again data state, but of type nothing. We're not returning any actual data there. We're just returning that something went wrong and maybe pass the exception. Pretty simple. Last will be loading. This is not going to return absolutely anything. It's just to basically tell my UI to show the progress bar. Whoops, I kept typing database, but I need to do data state. And this again will be nothing because we're not returning anything. So if you go to like the Android documentation, this is a pretty common class that you see. I'll actually put a little comment up here for you from the source code. So it just says this is not my standard data state class, which I just explained to you. I wanted to simplify things for this Hilt example. My standard implementation is much more complex. So you can see the link to an example of one of those. So pretty simple, basically just we do some kind of operation. Was it successful? Was there an error? Should we be showing the progress bar? That's it. All right, so we are now ready to work on the repository. So I'm going to close these. We're going to go into main repository, and I'm actually going to pull up an architecture diagram. For those of you who've never seen this architecture diagram, this is kind of the standard architecture that is recommended on the Android documentation. You have your activity or your fragment, or in other words, your view. You have a view model, which manages kind of all of your data. You have a repository, and then the repository has access to the different data sources. Usually it's like the room persistence library, which is what you see here, or a remote data source using a library like Retrofit. So this is exactly what we're going to be doing right now. So we've kind of set up the room stuff, we set up the Retrofit stuff. Now we're going to work on the repository. So I want to add a constructor, and we're going to pass a couple constructor arguments. One is the DAO. The next is going to be the Retrofit instance. Another one is going to be the cache mapper. And the last one will be the network mapper. And I forgot to add a value right here. So these are all the dependencies that we're going to need to do the network request, to cache the data, and then to emit that data back to the view model, which will then emit it to the UI. So this is going to have a single function, suspend function. We'll call it get blogs because that's what it's going to do. It's going to get some blogs from the OpenAPI website. It's going to return a flow, which is a Kotlin coroutines data structure, a very beautiful data structure. I love this. Ever since Kotlin coroutines came up with flows and channels, I absolutely fell in love with it. It makes all this stuff much easier than it used to be. You used to have to put like live data in here, use mediators, set it, remove it, all kinds of really complicated things. And now you're going to see just how easy it is to to do a network request, cache it, to emit it to the UI, do all this stuff. It makes it way, way easier. So we're going to use this flow builder, which is another Kotlin coroutines dependency. And then the first thing that I want to do here is I want to emit a loading state. So I want to do data state.loading. So what this is going to be interpreted as in the UI is the UI is going to see, okay, we got something emitted. Oh, it's telling me to show the progress bar. So now I'm going to show the progress bar. That's what it's going to do. And I'm going to add a 1000 millisecond delay here just so you can actually see the progress bar for at least a second, because this network request is going to be so fast that you probably wouldn't even see the progress bar. So I'm just going to delay it 1000 milliseconds. Of course, don't do this in production. Never just delay anything. There's absolutely no point other than for teaching purposes. So I'm delaying this 1000 milliseconds. Now I'm going to add a try catch block here to catch any exceptions that might happen when we do all of our kind of work that we're about to do. So I'm going to grab the network blogs first. And because this is a suspend function, I don't need to do any kind of fancy threading. I don't need to worry about doing this on a background thread. This is automatically going to be asynchronous. And later, when we actually launch this off, I can define what thread pool to launch this in. So that's going to be done in the view model later. So just for now, just notice how simple this is. All I need to do is call blog retrofit.get, and that's going to retrieve that data on whatever thread I launch this coroutine on, which we're going to be doing later. Now I want to get blogs from those network blogs. So we're going to be using our network mapper, network mapper to map from entity list, because that's what we just got. We just got a list of entities, a list of network blog, or what are they called? Let's go back into here and just see their blog network entities. I just got a list of those. Now I want to convert those to blog objects. So that's what I just did. Now I want to loop through each one of those blog objects. So for blog in blogs, and I want to insert that into the database cache. So I can do blog DAO.insert, and I need to use my cache mapper here because we're mapping a blog object from our model. So this right here, we're mapping this to a blog entity. So if we look here and go into room, notice the DAO takes a blog cache entity as input. So that's what we need to do. We need to map it from a blog to a blog cache entity. So that's what we're going to do. So I'll do map to entity is actually what we're after here, passing that blog object, and then it's going to get inserted into the cache. So now to finish things up, what I want to do is I want to query all of the blogs that now exist in the cache. So all the ones that I just inserted. So I can say value cached blogs equals blog DAO.get. So retrieve all of those from the cache. And now I want to emit those to the UI. So I want to say datastate.success and pass cache mapper.map from entity list, and then pass that list of cached blogs. So just emitting that data to the UI after it's been retrieved from the network, sent to the cache, retrieved from the cache. Now I want to show that. And if there's an error, I can just do emit datastate.error and just pass that exception, so E. And that's our use case. So that's the one thing that this repository needs to do, is just do kind of all of these things and emit the data to the UI. Okay, so the last class that we're going to build before we work on the activity is the view model. So I'm going to right click on the main package directory and create a new package named UI. I'm going to move main activity into the UI package. You could also move the application into the UI package, but I'm just going to leave it here. It's common to put it into the UI package, or it's pretty common also to just leave it out. So you can do whatever you like. It's not really important. So inside of UI, I'm going to create that main view model class. So if you're familiar with Dagger, if you've used Dagger before, you know that injecting and providing view models was not the easiest thing to do. But with Hilt, it is very, very simple. And I'll show you just how simple it is. So all I need to do here is go down below one line, and I need to do view model inject. And then I just add the constructor, and that's it. That's all I need to do to inject a view model. Of course, I need to extend by the view model class. And actually, I did lie technically. There's one thing that I do need to provide here. And that's to use the assisted annotation and provide the saved state handle. So private value, saved state handle, save state handle. And all this stuff can be found in the Android documentation, by the way. So if you were to go, I'll just actually bring up a window here. Now is just to search, Dagger Hilt and go to the Android documentation right here, dependency injection with Hilt. You can go down to the view model kind of section. So if you go to Hilt and Jetpack integrations, it'll show you how to inject view models with Hilt, and it gives you an example here. So getting the dependencies and then just creating a view model and using that view model inject annotation. Very, very easy. So we've got the saved state handle, which we're actually not even going to be using, but the thing that we are going to be using is the main repository. So we need to make sure that we add that as a dependency to the constructor of our view model. Now you might be thinking, but Mitch, you didn't add an inject here. And you're right, I didn't, but that's because we're going to be providing this in a module later on. Well, actually we could just do it right now. So let's go into the DI package and create a new class. This class will be named repository module, and it's going to be an object. So annotating this with @module. So you've seen this a couple times now. We want to install in the application component class. So there we go. We have our module. It's going to be installed in the application component. We need to annotate it with @singleton, @provides. Now provide main repository. It's going to take a bunch of constructor arguments. So we need the DAO, blog DAO. We need the retrofit object. So we need blog retrofit. We need the cache mapper. So cache mapper, and we need the network mapper. So remember, if you take a look at the repository, these are all the constructor arguments. These are the things that we need to build this repository object. So this will be of type main repository, and then return main repository, the blog DAO, the retrofit object, the cache mapper, and the network mapper. There we go. That's now our repository. So now this can be injected, and it's going to be injected into our view model. So I know at the beginning of this video, I said that I was going to be using MVVM architecture, but I'm actually going to be using MVI architecture. I'm going to be using MVI because I think that MVI it's literally identical to MVVM. It's just better because it has better organization, and you're going to see why here. So if you don't really know about MVVM, you don't really know about MVI, whatever the case, it doesn't matter. I'm going to show you everything that you need to know. Just know that MVI is essentially exactly the same as MVVM. It just has added organizational features. So it's just better because it's very descriptive of what you want to do. So you're saying, do this thing and get this input. It's just much more organized, I guess. That's the best way to put it. So let's do that. So when using MVI architecture, the first thing you want to do is create a state class. So I'm going to call it main state event. And inside of this state class, you want to describe all of the different events that you can fire off. Well, in this application, we can only fire off one event, and that's get blogs event. So basically when this gets fired off, we want to go and retrieve the blogs from the network. That's the only thing that it can do. Sometimes I like to put a none event, so main state event, just like maybe to clear things up if you ever need to. Not really necessary. This is an optional thing. You don't really need this. So this is the added organization that I was talking about. So now up at the top, I'm going to create a data state object. So private value data state, and this is going to be a mutable live data object. Going to return data state wrapping around a list of blog objects. So getting all of these imports, and that's going to be a new mutable live data object. Now we need a way to take in state events, so main state events, and convert that into data state. That's essentially what we need to do. I accidentally deleted that. Give myself a little bit more room. Let's give you a better view. So I'm going to create a getter function, first of all, for the data state. So just do data state. This will be live data wrapping around data state, wrapping around a list of blog objects. Getting all of those imports, and we need to add a getter, so just get equals the underscore data state. So this is private, and then this is the accessor for that data state. Now we need to write a function for setting the state event, interpreting the state event, and then doing whatever we need to given a certain state event. So function set state event is what I'll call it. It'll be a main state event as input. I want to do view model scope. Looks like I'm actually missing some dependencies, so we're going to need to go into the build.gradle file and add a couple more dependencies here. So again, if you go to the source code and you go to the build.gradle file, just make sure to grab these dependencies. You'll actually need this one to instantiate the view model anyway. So grabbing the fragment KTX one and also this lifecycle live data KTX. So these two dependencies right here. So copying those, going to build.gradle and pasting those down below, hitting sync. And again, you can get that from the source code for the project. So that will give me access, or that should give me access to the view model scope. There we go. And then I'm going to launch this coroutine. So I can say when the main state event is, well, we only have two cases. So is get blog events, do the arrow, open this up. In that case, what do I want to do? I want to do main repository dot get blogs. This should be actually get blogs, but it doesn't really matter. We can just do get blog, do on each. And then what I want to do in the case of data state coming back, so I can pass data state into the Lambda here. In that case, every time I want to do data state dot value and just set that. So set that to the data state, and I want to do launch in the view model scope. So view model scope. And that is all I need to do. This is telling me that I need to annotate this with the experimental coroutines API. So I'll do that. Now I can also use the none case, but it doesn't matter. So I can say is none, do the arrow, and then just say, who cares? We're not actually using that. So I hope that you can see that if we had like a whole bunch of state events, like a whole bunch of different state events, this would be a much more organized way to do things, because you have, this one set state event function that I'm going to call inside of main activity, and then given whatever state event, it's going to get the data and set the data. Now, of course, that would mean that this can't just be a list of blog posts, because you might be returning some different types of data. So you'd want to have some kind of a generic in here, like some kind of generic wrapper. But that comes down to what I said about the data state class. In this video, I greatly simplified my data state class. Usually it's much more complex and it can handle different types of data, but just to keep things simple here, we have a single type of data that it's going to be returning, which is the list of blogs, and we only have one state event, so it's very simple. If you want to see like a more realistic, more complex example, I definitely encourage you to check out the courses on my website. More specifically, the ones you'd probably want to watch is Clean Architecture. If you can get through it, it's definitely a more advanced course, but that would be the one to watch. Or if you want to know like an MVI introduction, this is a great one. Even beginners can watch this one, Model View Intent Architecture. This is a beginner's course. And after that, I would say Powerful Android Apps with Jetpack Architecture. That's definitely the one you want to do next if you think Clean Architecture is a little bit too difficult for you. Now let's get back to the project. All right, so we are nearing the end. We've got kind of all the pieces in place. I can close all this stuff. And now we just need to go to main activity and actually kind of fire off the request and get the data and display it. So first of all, let's do, I'm going to type log t. Now you might not have this shortcut. Oh, I've already got it up there actually. You might not have that shortcut. That's a template that I built. So you might have to type this out manually, private value tag string. That's just for debugging. And now we're going to instantiate the view model. And this is very easy with Hilt. You'll see just how easy in a second here. So I'll say private value view model. This will be of type main view model. And we're going to use by view models. And I don't need to even specify the type here. This is going to tell me that I'm using an experimental feature, so I need to add the experimental feature annotation. This is the easiest way by far that I've ever seen to instantiate view models, and I love it. In case you're wondering which dependency is required for that, it is the fragment KTX dependency right here. So you need to have that in your build.gradle file in order to use by view models to instantiate the view model. Notice that I don't have to annotate it with add inject. I don't need to use a factory. I don't need to do anything. It's automatically going to know how to build that view model. So it's a beautiful thing. Now let's come down and build a couple functions. So first one is going to be subscribe observers, and it's going to take nothing. It's going to return nothing. This should be fun. I forgot to add the fun. Subscribe observers. So I want to do view model dot data state dot observe. I want to get the view lifecycle owner, which is just the activity observer, and inside the observer, we're going to see data state coming in from that flow emission. So now I just want to do a when statement. So when the data state is different things. So is let's say data state dot success. Remember those different cases that we have here. And it's going to be a list of blog posts coming in. So getting that import arrow and open this up. In that case, I want to call some functions. So I haven't built the functions that I'm going to call yet. So let me just write out these other cases and then we will build those. So this is going to be the error case and this is going to be the loading case. So we need to kind of add a to-do here. We need to call some functions, which I haven't built yet. So we're going to build those before we come into here. So let's go build those functions. So we want to cover kind of all the different cases. So the first one is like we need to display an error. So private fun display error. If there's ever an error returning from our request, then we want to display that. So I can say if the message does not equal null. So if there is an error message, then I can just do text, which is the text view inside the layout. Let me actually just show that to you. So if you go to resources, go to layout, activity main, the ID for this text view, which is just kind of centered, well, it occupies the whole page. This is called text. It has an ID of text. So that's what I'm referencing right here. So text.text equals message, equals message. I guess that's what I want if the message isn't null. Otherwise, I can say text.text equals unknown error. So if there's an error and it doesn't have a message, just show unknown error, and that should be fine. The next function can be loading, so display the progress bar. So private function display progress bar, and it can take a boolean is displayed, so boolean, and then I can just do progress bar. So the ID of the progress bar inside the layout is just progress bar. Set the visibility equals if is displayed, then we know that the visibility should be view.visible. Otherwise, we want to do view.gone. So if is displayed is true, display the progress bar. Otherwise, hide the progress bar. Pretty simple. Now, the last function is going to be for handling the actual data when we actually get some data coming in. So private function append blog titles. So remember, if you take a look at the data structure, I'll bring up, that was the wrong window. I'll bring up this. If we look at the data structure here, remember we have a bunch of stuff. We have the primary key, we have the title, the body, the image, the category. But the only thing that I'm going to do in this application is I'm going to extract the title. So we need to extract the title from the blog objects and then just display them in the UI. So that's what we've done in the sample application here. So let's write a loop to do that. So it's going to take input blogs. It's going to take a list of blog objects. Open this up. I'm going to do value string builder equals a new string builder object. Now I want to say for blog in blogs, I want to extract the title and append that to the string builder. So sb.append blog.title, and then just append also a new line. So that should handle all that. And then at the end of the day, you want to do text.text equals sb.toString. So just going to append all of that data. Okay, now coming back up to our subscribe observers function, now we have some functions that we can actually call given these different cases. So I can say display progress bar. That's going to be false, first of all. Basically, if there's an error or if there's data coming in, we want to hide the progress bar. That means that everything is complete. Otherwise, if it says loading, then we want to say display progress bar set equal to true. So the only way that it should show is if we get that loading status. Otherwise, we want to hide it. So in the success case, that means we actually did get the blog. So I can say append blog titles. I can say datastate.data just to get all that data from the data state. And if there's an error, I want to call display error. And in that case, I want to do datastate.exception and get the message from the exception that's going to be returned. Now, the last step here is going to be to subscribe our observers. And of course, we want to fire off that event. So I want to do set state event and call the get blogs event and initialize that. So that is how, I don't need to initialize that. That's how we fire everything off. This is kind of like the payout for MVI architecture. If you ever want to just fire off a request, a very specific request, all I need to do is call set state event and call the respective state event and everything will be handled. So with that should be everything we need. So if I run this now, we should see our blogs being retrieved from the network, cached, and then displayed in the UI. There we have the app launching. We see the progress bar for 1 second, and then there is the data being displayed. So everything is working exactly as expected. So that's it. That's the example, and that outlines a very, very common scenario that happens all the time in Android development. Get some network data, cache that network data, display it in the view model. And we've used MVI repository pattern with a view model. We've used a network layer with Retrofit. We've used a room layer or a caching layer with the room persistence library. We have injected all of our dependencies into the repository. We've injected the view model. We injected the view model into the activity. all of these different things. And this is a very, very common scenario. Like I said, you see this all the time. So hopefully if you're kind of a beginner, you don't know a lot about architecture, you don't know a lot about Dagger, maybe you've never seen Dagger before, this was a more, I know it was long, but I really wanted to kind of put everything together for you so that you could see a real example of like a really common scenario that happened all the time. So if this video helped you, please take the time to go down there, go to that little gray thumbs up, I think it is, and turn that into a blue thumbs up. YouTube does not know that this video was helpful to you unless you tell it that it was helpful. Please, I would really appreciate that if this video helped you at all. Also, as a reminder, if you want extra help with some of the more advanced concepts that I was mentioning throughout the video, head on over to codingwithmitch.com and check out courses. I got free courses, I got paid courses for all levels of Android developers, from beginner to quite advanced. I definitely encourage you to come here, watch some course demos. They're free. So if you wanted to like check out the clean architecture course, just click on it, go to course demo, watch the course demo. It's free. If you're wondering what people are saying about my courses, like if they find this stuff helpful, head on over to more and go to testimonials, and you'll read from, there's 748 testimonials at this point. So tons of stuff to read about. Try and find a bad one. There's not very many bad testimonials in here. I got an average rating of 4.98. So I'd be really surprised if you were able to find a bad testimonial in here. You know, a lot of these people have been getting jobs. In my Discord channel, I hear people saying all the time that they were able to get a job thanks to my courses. So if you're looking to start a career in Android development or advance your career in Android development, definitely consider the membership. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.